Chapter 997, Gambling God Dwayne. The core rules of Texas Hold'em were very simple. It was to use 2 whole cards and 5 community cards to form a hand with any 5-card combination. Whoever had the biggest hand won. And the community cards were dealt in 3 phases. 3 community cards to form the flop in the first phase, a 4th community card called the turn in the second phase, and a 5th community card called the river in the third phase. Each phase allowed players to fold, check, call, or raise. This continued until everyone was done, or until one person didn't fold. Klein fiddled with the chip in his hand as he divined the existence of any lucky instances within the next few rounds. However, he was unable to tell which exact round it was. After all, it was only a quick and simple divination with average effects. Using this method to play with ordinary people and low-sequence beyonders wouldn't be a problem as long as the correct strategy is used, but it's definitely inadequate against demigods. It's already quite a challenge to defeat a mid-sequence beyonder. Must I close my eyes each round and do a complete dream divination? Haha, if that were the case, Dwayne Dance might end up with the title Sleeping Gambling God. Klein sighed inwardly. He continued watching the round play out as he sat by the side. At present, he had already lost a big blind and a small blind when it was his turn. At this moment, Klein noticed one point. The Me-9 deputy director, Konas Kilgore, had lost 20 pounds to Admiral Amirius. A successful bribe? Admiral Amirius should be able to tell that Konas is using his powers as a baron of corruption, but he might not know that this Me-9 deputy director is a demigod. The next round will be interesting. Hee. Klein jolted to attention as the new round began. He didn't check his whole cards when the croupier handed him 2 new ones. Instead, he placed the metal chip he was playing with in his hand onto his whole card, taking on the stance of not planning to look at them. After 2 people folded, the stern and old-fashioned Amirius Revelt casually took a look at his whole cards. After counting 5 pounds worth of chips, he threw it into the middle of the table, having raised the stakes without garnering any surprises. Another person folded as Mact called. Right on the heels of that, Konas Kilgore, who had an unyielding personality, raised the stakes, throwing out a total of 20 pounds. Calvin confirmed his whole cards once again before calling. After one last person folded, Dwayne Dance didn't do an actual count. He grabbed a handful of chips and threw it out. The croupier who was in charge of counting the chips glanced at it before precisely announcing Dwayne's action. 20 pounds. Call. I thought it would be 50 pounds. From the looks of it, I'm still not very used to these chips. The white-side-burned Dwayne Dance with an outstanding temperament said with a laugh. However, he didn't add on the additional 30 pounds. At this moment, no one made a move. It was Amirius Revelt's turn again. This admiral didn't even glance at the remaining players. Picking up 5 10-pound chips, he threw them out. Another raise. He didn't show any perturbations in his emotions, acting as though he was ordering a cup of black tea. However, that indescribable sense of dominance and the act of repeatedly raising the stakes pre-flop made the mood at the table freeze. Such situations often implied that Admiral Amirius had excellent hole cards. Perhaps they were a pair of aces or a pair of kings, or an ace and king. Mact decided to fold. Konas Kilgore rubbed his high nose bridge and glanced around with his dark blue eyes before saying, "Call." Colonel Calvin confirmed his cards again. After 10 seconds of hesitation, he chose to fold. Dwayne Dance touched the metal chip on his 2 whole cards and smiled. Call. After a round of expressing their intentions, there were only 3 players for the round. Then, the croupier flipped the 3 community cards in the middle of the table for the flop. 2 of spades, 9 of hearts, and king of spades. The person who was up first was Admiral Amirius Revelt. He leaned forward slightly and said in a domineering manner, 50 pounds. He had immediately raised the stakes to 50 pounds. Mact, Calvin, and company, including those who weren't in the game, felt stifled for some baffling reason. Konas Kilgore trembled slightly, but he ultimately grabbed 50 pounds and threw it out. Dwayne Dance glanced at the deputy director of MI9. Completely unfazed by the pressure, he said with a smile, "Call." Upon hearing this, Calvin turned his head and nodded at Dwayne Dance with his deep blue eyes that resembled a nighttime lake, indicating his approval. From his point of view, Admiral Amirius's domineering stance didn't affect a person who came to lose money. At this moment, the red-vested croupier revealed the fourth card, the turn. 9 of spades. There were 3 spades, increasing the chances of a flush tremendously. However, Admiral Amirius still didn't hesitate. He calmly pushed a stack of chips. 100 pounds. Kona's Kilgore's fingers tapped on his whole cards, showing his lack of confidence. But ultimately, he chose to call. Dwayne Dance glanced at this deputy director once again and maintained his warm smile. Call. At this point in time, he had yet to see his whole cards, making Calvin somewhat worried. He believed that such an act was going overboard, a clear act of throwing money away. It wasn't something Admiral Amirius, who was relatively conservative, might find acceptable. At this moment, the red-vested croupier revealed the final card, the river. 2 of club. As such, the community cards took form. 2 of spades, 9 of hearts, king of spades, 9 of spades, and 2 of club. 200 pounds. Admiral Amirius pushed a pile of metal chips in with an extremely domineering attitude. Kona's Kilgore took a deep breath before pushing 2 stacks of chips. 500 pounds. This amount of money was half of his purported annual salary. Is he trying to bluff? Calvin and Macht exchanged looks, believing that Brigadier General Kilgore had made it too obvious, making it easy to see through him. One had to know that when playing Texas Hold'em, apart from doing risk management and probability calculations, it also involved psychological battles most of the time. Be it in terms of body language, expression, or the style used for raises, they made it easy to expose one's hidden cards. Of course, good players could also use these details to deliberately misdirect their opponents. Dwayne Dance sized up Kona's Kilgore before he laughed. Then, like the previous few times, he said, "Call." Amirius raised his hands, prepared to push all his remaining chips, to pressure his opponents into folding. At this moment, he suddenly paused. His deadpan expression wore a look of solemnity. After a few seconds of silence, he calmly said, "Call." At this point, the whole cards could be revealed to compare each person's hand. Admiral Amirius flipped his card first. It was an ace of spades and 10 of spades. It formed a flush with the 2 of spades, king of spades, and 9 of spades. It was a rather high-ranking hand, with the only ones bigger than it being a full house, 4 of a kind, straight flush, and royal flush. "It's your turn," Amirius then urged Kona's. Kona's first flipped open a single card, king of diamonds. It made 2 pairs with the K and 9 from the community cards. Following that, he picked up his second whole card. At that moment, the remaining poker cards at the red-vested croupier's end blurred. Pa. The whole card was flipped open, revealing itself, 9 of clubs. "What?" Macht and company exclaimed, hardly believing their eyes. This meant that Kona's Kilgore had obtained a full house, 9s over kings. It was bigger than a flush. "Sorry about that, full house," Kona's looked at Amirius and said with a smile. Then he turned to look at Dwayne Dance. "You can reveal your cards." "I'm also very curious as to what my cards are." Dwayne Dance smiled. He picked up the metal chip that he had placed down on his cards and very casually flipped the 2 whole cards. "Hey." "What?" Calvin and company rubbed their eyes. Dwayne Dance's whole cards were a very weak pair, 2 of hearts, 2 of diamonds. There happened to be a very small pair in the community cards, 2 of spades, 2 of club. They formed a 4 of a kind, the smallest rank when it came to 4 of a kind, but it was higher ranked than all the full houses. Praise the lady. Dwayne Dance drew the crimson moon across his chest in pleasant surprise, looking as though he had never expected it. An interesting round. Amirius was taken aback for a moment before he gently clapped. Kona's Kilgore gave Dwayne Dance a deep look and said with a laughing sigh, "I never expected the final winner to be you." Klein wiped the smile from his face as he inwardly grumbled. "It's only right that I win over the 2 of you." On the one hand, Admiral Amirius enjoys pressuring others and doesn't really rely on his beyonder powers to cheat. As for you, You placed your focus and beyonder powers on Admiral Amirius, thus ignoring me. On the other hand, the one playing cards with you is actually named Winner Inuni. Without even looking at his whole cards, it was obvious that he was relying solely on luck. At the moment he placed his chip on the whole cards, Klein had already swapped positions with Inuni as they switched faces with each other. Although Colonel Calvin had got him to deliberately lose £1,000, Klein decided to win a killing after he saw Kona's Kilgore. This wasn't because he couldn't bear to part with the money. Instead, his main motive was to garner the attention of this MI9 demigod. He wanted to get familiar with him and build relationships. Only by doing this could Klein have an opportunity to obtain intelligence from Kona's Kilgore and even carry out an assault on him. After all, he was a demigod. To deal with him in Backland required sufficient care and caution. He would rather give up an operation if he lacked the confidence to guarantee a kill or lure him away from Backland. Otherwise, he was bound to expose himself, ending up being surrounded by demigods and even angels in Backland. In the subsequent rounds, Klein won and lost different rounds. In the end, not only did he keep his £1,000 in chips, but he had even won nearly an additional £1,000. During this process, Calvin had gestured to Dwayne Dance to lose, but he was left stupefied by the latter's ridiculous good luck that left him undefeatable. After the game came to an end, a person walked over to Dwayne Dance with a smile, Kona's Kilgore. Big blind is equal to the minimum bet. The small blind is normally half the big blind.